Welcome back to Tierra Gitana. My name is Abby, and today we're going to be talking about Mars. And I have my notes on my computer right here, so I'm going to go through everything that I wrote down when I was pretty much picking out everything that I wanted to talk about Mars for. And so we'll just get right into it. So Mars is the god of war, historically speaking. And that's like a big thing to focus on when you're thinking about Mars energy, and we will talk about this as we continue. His color is red. Day is Tuesday if you want to do spell work or anything like that during those times, or ritual work. His day is Tuesday if you want to channel the Mars energy. The sign that he rules is Aries, and he basically rules how we act and how we react. So his whole entire energy is about drive, passion, force. He also co-rules sex in a way as well. Pluto does as well, but he also co-rules sex because he is the action of it. Because there's levels to sex. He says sex itself is an experience. It's his own ritual. So when you're thinking about Mars energy, especially when you're looking at it in your chart in correlation to a sign, it has to do with movement. And sometimes it can be movement that's not thought before doing, and sometimes it's very calculated depending on the sign that is there. It's also about addressing challenges. And again, this goes back to that placement. So for example, if you have Mars in Scorpio, which also Mars co-rules Scorpio, you have a sign that's very calculated, and that will react in the way they will react into, even if it's, whether it's positive, like a negative experience that they're reacting to, or they're getting, like, let's say they're getting revenge on someone or something like that. The way they'll react is very thought out and very, like, almost elaborate. There's a whole concept of Scorpio and the scorpion and it having a stinger and stinging you. The process of it stinging you, they still have to get you into the position of being able to sting you. So that process turns into very calculated, but it can also happen very quickly and very aggressive. So verbally, they can also sting you and hit you in an area where they learned about you before in order to get you in the position of being able to weaken you later. And that seems very complicated to, that could seem very complicated to many people, or many other signs, but to Scorpio, they master that ability, and they really they love getting away with it too. Listen, don't mess with Scorpios, that's all I'm gonna say. They love getting away with it. They love the feeling of the way they got you, because it's like Mars and Scorpio is really like, the way that anger comes out is very much through emotional wounding, but it will hit you on a core level. And because Scorpio is a water sign, it will hit you on an emotional side, where it could traumatize you if you're on the receiving end of this thing. It could traumatize you, it could traumatize a person, it could transform that person, it could push a person to being different. Scorpio's period, they ruled transformation, because they're ruled by Pluto as well. So they force people, even if they don't know it, to transform without the other person knowing. There's, you know how they say people never change? They obviously have not met a Scorpio, or like or have been doing shadow side Scorpio behaviors, which is another thing. But that's like how Mars and Scorpio would play it. They would be very much calculated in how they do it. So the way Scorpios do it is that from the get-go that they meet you, they're already finding things about you, and you will always know less about them than they know of you, because they know how to get you talking, they know how to kind of allow you to open up, until the point that later they can use that against you, what they learned because you opened up to them. So they can be they kind of take that from Cancer a little bit. They can have that, oh yeah, I'm just a water sign, I'm gonna nurture you and I just wanna, but then they use that to protect themselves emotionally later, even though the fact that they had to sting you is it's almost like a bee too. Like the fact that they had to sting you still ends up hurting them to a certain level, even though it pleases them. There's sometimes that they have to hurt people even though they love them. So it's we're gonna talk about it in the Scorpio video when that comes. But that's one way to understand calculated movement when it comes to Mars specifically. When it comes to, for example, let me pick a different sign that's not Aries, because that would be too easy to explain. Well, no, let's just talk about Mars and Aries. Why not? So Mars and Aries, when you're thinking about calculated movement with the whole Scorpionic energy, and we're just talking about movement, period. Mars and Aries will move, period. Does it take time to be calculated? Yes, but the way it calculates it is very, very quickly. It's almost like trying to catch like air. It just happens too fast. A lot of people this is kind of why Aries has a reputation of changing their minds very quickly, just because they're about movement. They don't have like the time to just really sit down for an hour and be like, okay, well maybe I should think about it. They're like, okay, I already see what the outcome, like I already see what I want. It's over there, so I'm just gonna go get it. Like they're just like go. So when it comes to calculated movement versus movement, they have a little bit of both. It just happens really, really fast. Are they always right for it? No. Sometimes they are impatient. That's one of the things that they get from that Mars energy, impatience, because it's just forward pushing movement, like let's get to it, let's get to the point of this conversation, whatever it is. But it does address challenges very quickly, and that's kind of the point. You either address challenges in a calculated way, depending on what sign you have in there, or you address it in a just let's get to it. Cardinal energy will try to get to it depending on which cardinal sign it is, because Capricorn will plan but then move, even though Mars will give it that push of okay, but we still have to move. So the way to address challenges would be in that way. The other thing that we need to talk about is being a coward and having like a placement that could actually make you use Mars energy out of fear, and so your movements are calculated, but because you don't want to have to move, actually have to do something about it. If you want to look at like every kind of minor villain that ends up being sneaky and playing a role in movies where they kind of manipulated a situation, in a way you can kind of say that Scorpio can do that too, but Scorpios can actually kill you too because they rule death. So don't piss off a Scorpio. But when it comes to fear, and that energy, depending on what sign it is, it might not be able to. There might be like if you look at Mars in Pisces in his shadow self, it wouldn't want to hurt anybody, and the way it would be driven would be different. It wouldn't be the way. It wouldn't be the same way that like other signs would be aggressive about it. Pisces is very much about reflection and introspection, and not in like the subconscious. It's not trying to completely go out of its way to hurt people. So when you put it with Mars, it would rather kind of just pull back and walk away than actually fight you. This also depends on the other placements in your chart, because let's say you have Aries everywhere but your Mars is in Pisces, you still have Aries energy, and so that Mars energy could play off in a different way. It's just that it's in a different area of your chart. That doesn't mean that the energy of Mars isn't there. It's just that Mars in your natal chart would still, the way you would react would still be coming from that Pisces energy. So even though you can very much access that Aries and that will dominate over the Pisces energy in order to act, the Pisces energy would still make it so it will be in your subconscious. It will be almost, it will create a wound from hurting other people, and that can like mess with your head later on, which is how Pisces works. It's not super fast or anything like that. It's just flowing, and it's like the water waves, it just flows. Okay, the next thing I wrote was putting to work your mastered skill. And this is important because, again, Mars is about movement, so you have to look at passion. If you are in it, like creating it's like creating a war in your head, so you need to be tactical in like how you're going to put whatever it is that you've already learned to the test, how you're going to apply it. So Mars comes into play really well if you've learned something, or you know something, or you've studied something and you want to put it into motion. And this also comes into play when people argue and when you get into debates. The sign that you have in Mars can very well dictate how you will debate. So for example, Mars in Gemini will be very intellectual with the way it will debate, and it will pick its battles based on the mind. So you have the Mercurial energy playing with the Mars energy, and it will be passionate about thought and passionate about stupidity and what others don't understand and what they lack in understanding. So for example, when it comes to arguing about politics, with Mars energy, and if you have like that Mars in Gemini, you will, I mean, depending if like the other person can have Mars in Gemini too, it depends, like you have to look at both parties as far as the planet placement. But let's say you have one person on the side that just has Mars in Gemini. That person would have already looked at the subject and would have taken points as to why they are driven to be passionate about this issue, and those are the points that they will battle in as well. So they will seek to create their argument, and they will be passionate about their argument based on the points that are there on the table. On the other hand, Mars in Gemini, depending on where everything else is on the chart, because there is a shadow and a light self, you could think you know about a subject very well, but then you don't. And so when you get into an argument with someone and they're handing it to you because you didn't know, but you're just talking about it because there's something about the topic that you're passionate about, or that you try to align yourself with, but then you're actually wrong. You will still be fighting the same points that you make you passionate about it. But even if you're wrong, there's something about it that's gonna make that go back, because obviously Geminis like to absorb information, even if they're toxic Geminis. I mean, look at the president, even if they're toxic Geminis. So when like you get told that you're wrong all the time, and for the example of this, I'm going to use the whole situation that happened with him having to sign the executive about like the children and reuniting them with their families. He kept trying to play it off as like, first of all, he was selling it as something else. That's one. Because they were trying to be tactical and trying to be, oh, okay, we're going to make Congress do it. But the problem with waiting to make Congress do it is that the whole country would be looking at you because you were the leader. And so when you are the leader of a country and you have this huge Gemini placement, because he has his sun is a Gemini, but he also has his Leo placements is where he gets his ego from. And so, and then his moon is in Sagittarius. That's the worst part, because when you have a dumb Sagittarius and a sun in Gemini that does not understand information, it's just, oh god, this is what you get, really. So when you have the entire country telling you that this is wrong, that separating kids from their families are different, and then what Gemini would do is they would sit with that information. They would be with their points, which is what they were trying to argue originally, which was, oh no, Congress has to do it, we can't do anything about it, and that's the talking points. That's the argument that the Gemini would be making. But then they would need to switch that perspective and sit with it and be like, wait, I'm not correct. Because there's times with Geminis that they need to admit that they're not correct, and because they need information, they'd like information, but where all their points are completely wrong, and you have everybody telling you that's not it. It really, they need to pull back, and then when they pull back, and then be like, wait, this is not morally correct. Then you have the whole, we want to keep families together and all this nonsense that he had to end up saying that he couldn't do it because it was Congress, to actually doing it. And that whole thing comes from his ego side. Donald Trump is very egotistical. I don't know, I think I should probably do a video on his like cult chart. That would be kind of fun. But he is very egotistical. And so he moves a lot from his ego. That's the Leo rising. But the problem is that his Sag moon and his Gemini sun, he has a lot of opportunities to be knowledgeable, but his ego is too inflated, so he can't. So he literally needs to be told like a kid that he's wrong. So what can we do? But anyway, that's the example of how that would play off with kind of like that Mars energy, because when you're looking at how you address situations, that's how it would play off in real life, when it comes to like Mars and Gemini having to readdress incorrect data, and then really looking back and seeing what is the correct way. So putting work to your master skill, or what you think your master skill is. Some signs will not have a master skill. Some signs will dip into different areas and just casually know things about certain specific things, but not necessarily master a certain area. Also, the concept of being a warrior or a diplomat. So are you going to talk? So this goes back to being calculated or just moving. Are you going to talk, or are you going to fight? There's some that will just fight, and there's some that will just be like, no, but wait, let me just try to like Mars and Cancer will be very calculated, because ultimately the mother energy needs to know how to run. They already know how to run the thing. That's the that's a matriarchy, so they know how to run, and where the balance needs. What do you need? They already know. They know you need to feed yourself. They know you need to drink water. Like, they know how to take care of the thing. So they're very calculated in every single thing that they do. So it's important to think about and kind of meditate on that, on how you use your Mars energy. Warrior or diplomat. I have Mars in Capricorn, so very calculated, but also the thing about Capricorns is that we will be calculated, but when we there are levels to it, because we can react. If we already had processed something, again, this goes back to mastering a skill, and because Capricorn has the ability to climb, and that's literally what we do. We master our skills, we master our foundations, where we have to make sure that's stable in order to continue. We are both warriors and diplomats, because if we already mastered the skill, then we can end you because we mastered it already. But we can also talk you out of some shit. It's both. It's a little bit of both. And basically just what you need to remember about Mars is, think about it as if you were a soldier. What will you go to war for? What are you going to fight for? That's really when it comes out. This can apply to love, and when you're looking at love in a chart, you really have to focus on looking at Mars, Venus, Pluto. Like there's a whole thing that you need to see together and look at and say, okay, this is where my energies come from this way. So if I'm in a relationship, right, and we're in an argument, that's how I'm going to war with these arguments. So you need to look at Mars in that way. And it's not a bad thing. Mars is a great planet. Without Mars, what would we be doing? Like what would we be doing right now? So yeah, there's like levels to this, and it's important to just be open to the energy. It doesn't always have to be, our drive doesn't have to be negative, but Mars allows us also to address our wounds and where healing needs to take place, because our reactions to things that come from Mars can allow us to open up to other areas of healing that we need to have, and other things that we need to accept about ourselves, and shadow work that we need to do. And it really allows you to, when you pop off or when you go off about certain things, it's like, wait, why am I, if you pull yourself back and you're like, wait, why am I so passionate about this thing? Why is this thing it's like triggering me? Because Mars is like lighting a match. So it's like, why is this a thing that just, if you pull back and just meditate on it, question yourself, ask yourself questions, like journal if that's what you like to do, then you can learn a lot about yourself. So yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Sorry it's a little bit longer than the other ones. Mars is long. I will see you guys on the next video, and all my links and stuff will be down below. So yeah, have a good day. Bye.